Single mechanic taught a kid to fix her bike, unaware her mother was the CEO watching the whole time. "Excuse me, sir, my bike is broken. I do not know how to get home." The voice was small and shaky. Jake looked up from locking the garage door, hands still greasy from the last job. Rain fell in steady sheets, and the street was nearly deserted except for the little girl standing in front of him. She doesn't look older than 8 years old. Her blonde hair was soaked and clung to her cheeks. A pink hoodie hugged her thin frame, the sleeves damp and dirty. An old bicycle leaned at her side, its front wheel visibly bent. One strap on her backpack had torn, and it dragged behind her on the wet pavement. Jake narrowed his eyes. "You lost, kid?" She nodded. "I think I turned wrong. Then my bike stopped working. I tried to fix it, but..." She held up her hands, muddy, trembling. Jake sighed. It was late. The rain was getting heavier. Then a blaring horn. A truck barreled toward the intersection. The girl stepped forward instinctively. Without thinking, Jake lunged, grabbed her by the arm, and yanked her out of the street. "Jesus, kid," he muttered. "You trying to get yourself killed?" She looked up, startled. "I didn't see it coming." Jake exhaled. "All right, bring the bike in. Let's see what we've got." They wheeled it into the garage. The old overhead light buzzed to life. Jake knelt beside the bike, inspecting the bent wheel, the loose chain, the frayed brake cable. "You ride this thing a lot?" She nodded. "Since we moved here, my mom works a lot. I ride after school." Jake raised an eyebrow. "You just move in?" "Last week." Her shoulders shook slightly. Jake noticed her trying not to shiver. "Take off your bag, sit over there," he said, nodding to a crate. She did as told. Jake got to work. Fixing things, especially in silence, was something he understood. He worked fast, methodically, avoiding eye contact. 20 minutes later, the bike was functional. Not perfect, but enough to get her home. "There," he said, straightening. The girl was watching him, not scared anymore, but curious. "You ever fix anything?" he asked. She shook her head. He paused, then crouched back down. "Come here." She stood beside him. "See this?" He pointed to the chain. "It came loose, that happens, but it's fixable." He gently guided her small fingers to the gear lever, then the brake line, showing her how it all connected. "If you know how to take care of it," he said softly, "it won't let you down." "Really?" she asked. "Machines aren't magic," he said, "but they listen if you listen first." She smiled for the first time. "My name's Lily." He nodded. "Jake." Across the street, parked beneath the dim glow of a streetlight, a black SUV sat quietly. Behind the wheel, a woman watched. Rebecca's fingers gripped the steering wheel tightly. Her blonde hair was pulled into a low bun. Her eyes didn't blink as she watched Jake kneel beside her daughter. She had followed Lily, just in case. Ever since they moved, her daughter had begged for more independence, and she had agreed, cautiously. But now, watching this man with grease-stained hands gently teach her daughter how to mend a chain, something inside Rebecca shifted. She did not step out, but she did not drive away either. The garage smelled of oil, old rubber, and a faint trace of lavender from a long-forgotten air freshener. Jake sat alone on a beat-up stool beside the workbench, the only light coming from a flickering bulb above his head. The walls were lined with tools, some rusted, some well-used, others barely touched. In the far corner, leaning against the brick wall, was a photograph of a woman with warm, kind eyes and auburn hair, smiling beside a lake, her hand resting gently on her rounded belly. Above the photo hung a small wooden plaque. Emma's Light. Jake stared at it more nights than he admitted, even to himself. He rubbed his hands together, still darkened with grease. The garage was quiet now, but echoes from earlier still lingered. Her voice, her questions, the way she had watched him work like it meant something. It had been a long time since Jake let anyone into his space, and longer still since a child reminded him of someone he had loved and lost. Lily had left the bike behind. The front brake still needed more time, and Jake, cautious by habit, insisted she walk home and pick it up tomorrow. She had nodded reluctantly. "But don't fix it without me," she'd said. "I want to learn how." He had watched her disappear into the misting rain, small figure wrapped in a pink hoodie, shoes squishing with every step. Now the bike stood in the corner, slightly damp but upright, leaning on its kickstand like it was waiting. Jake opened the bottom drawer of his workbench. Inside was a collection of odds and ends, old streamers, cracked reflectors, tiny bells. He reached past them and gently pulled out something wrapped in tissue paper, a small purple backpack. He held it for a moment, running his hand over the fabric. It was the exact shade Emma had worn on their wedding day, lavender, her favorite color. They'd gotten married in the backyard under clouds threatening rain, the same kind that had hung over today. He had kept the backpack tucked away for years, could not bring himself to give it away, could not bring himself to use it. Until now. Jake took a breath and filled the bag. A mini tire pump, a set of Allen keys, a flashlight shaped like a turtle, and a granola bar. Then he grabbed a notepad, tore out a page, and scribbled a message in his thick, uneven print. "Don't give up, little one. You're braver than you know, stronger than you feel, better than you think." He folded the note, tucked it inside, and zipped the bag. Then he stood, walked across the room, and placed the backpack gently on the seat of Lily's bike. He didn't know if she'd understand. Maybe she wouldn't say anything at all. But it felt right. Just a few streets away, inside a townhouse dressed in polished stone and modern furniture, Rebecca stood barefoot in her home office, eyes locked on a grainy black and white screen. She wore a tailored blouse, sleeves rolled to her elbows. Her heels lay discarded by the desk. The soft hum of her security feed filled the space. The camera she'd installed 2 days ago was discreet, perched just high enough on the opposite building to capture Jake's garage door. Not to spy. At least that was what she told herself. Lily had begged for freedom, had pleaded not to be followed like a baby. Rebecca had given in on one condition: quiet surveillance, distance. But now, watching the footage, she wasn't sure what she was trying to protect Lily from anymore. She watched Jake kneel beside the bike, disappear briefly inside the garage, then return with something in his hands. The backpack. Rebecca leaned forward slightly as he placed it on the seat with the gentleness of someone handling something precious. Then he sat beside the bike, elbows resting on his knees, staring at the floor like he was waiting for ghosts to speak. Her hand found its way to her necklace, a silver pendant with a simple engraving. "Forever with us. Daniel." Her husband. Lost to a sudden stroke 3 years ago. No warning, no chance to say goodbye. Since then, Rebecca had carried the weight of both roles, mother and protector, businesswoman and broken heart. Lily had changed after Daniel died. She withdrew, spoke less, laughed even less than that. But today she had come home breathless with excitement. "Mom, I fixed a bike chain today." Well, almost. Jake helped. He said bikes can talk if you listen right. Rebecca had smiled, asked a few questions, but her chest had ached the whole time. Now, watching Jake through the camera, her voice broke the silence. "Who are you, and why are you so kind to my daughter?" No answer came. Only the hum of the feed and the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. Outside, the rain whispered against the windows. Inside the garage, the purple backpack waited on the seat of a small, slightly dented bicycle. Quiet proof that sometimes kindness speaks loudest in silence. The next morning the sky cleared, and a soft breeze rustled the trees. Jake was adjusting a scooter chain when he heard footsteps on gravel. He looked up. Lily had returned. She moved with quiet excitement, hoodie zipped to her chin. Her eyes landed on the purple backpack sitting on her bike's seat. She approached slowly, brushing her fingers over the fabric, then unzipped it. Inside were tools, a turtle-shaped flashlight, a granola bar, and a folded note. She read silently. Jake stepped from the garage, wiping his hands. "You came early." Lily turned, clutching the backpack. Did you leave this for me? Jake gave a small shrug. Seemed like you could use it. Her face lit up. Thank you. The note made me feel like I can do hard things. He nodded. You can. She smiled. Can I stay a bit? Before school? Jake gestured to a crate. Same rules. Break it, you owe me. Lily laughed and sat down. Across the street, Rebecca watched from her SUV. She hadn't planned to stay long, but now couldn't look away. Her daughter had gone straight to the garage, completely at ease. She watched Jake hand Lily a wrench. They leaned over an old frame, one pair of hands worn, the other curious. It became their routine. Every Saturday, Lily came back, sometimes in jeans, sometimes in dresses stained with grease. Jake always acted gruff, but within minutes he was teaching her how to align brake pads or listen for a loose chain. One day, Jake tapped a bike frame. Hear that rattle? Lily leaned in. What's it mean? Your derailleur's tired. Machines talk if you listen. Like people? She asked. Jake nodded. Exactly. Lily tilted her head. So if I cry and say I'm fine, that's like my chain rattling, Jake chuckled. You're smarter than most adults. Rebecca smiled through a blur of tears. As weeks passed, Jake spoke less but connected more. He let Lily make mistakes, and when she fixed her first flat tire, he didn't say much, just nodded. But his eyes glowed with pride. Then one Saturday, Lily asked, Did you ever have a daughter? Jake froze. He didn't answer. Picked up a wrench, set it down, then said, That's enough for today. I'm sorry, Lily whispered. He managed to smile. Some questions don't need answers. That night, Jake sat alone in the garage. He reached beneath the workbench and pulled out an old cassette player. He pressed play. A voice filled the air, warm and teasing. Jake, if you teach our daughter to ride a dirt bike before she learns to walk, I'll never forgive you. He closed his eyes. She'll be your little grease monkey, the voice continued, just like her dad. Jake sat in the silence, surrounded by memories. Outside, the moonlight glowed through the window. Inside, a man who had lost everything sat quietly, wondering if a second chance had just rolled into his life, on two bent wheels, carrying a crooked smile and the spark of something he thought he'd never feel again. Rebecca stared at the garage from her car. Her fingers curled around the steering wheel as if it might anchor her to her indecision. The windows were rolled up, the engine was off, but her mind ran in circles. Every Saturday now, like clockwork, Lily made her way to the same old garage on the corner. She came back covered in grease, her cheeks flushed with joy, her words spilling over with stories about Jake, how he made the bikes talk, how he taught her to listen with her hands. Rebecca had watched it all from afar, and each week her resolve weakened. Was it responsible to let her daughter bond with a stranger? A man who, by his own confession, lived alone and barely spoke unless necessary, or was it worse? To interrupt something that clearly lit her daughter's spirit from within. Daniel's voice echoed in her mind, warm, teasing, steady. Lily doesn't need a man with a corner office, Rebecca. She needs someone who can look her in the eye and really hear her. Rebecca's hand moved to her necklace, the silver chain warm against her skin. She closed her eyes, remembering the hospital room, Daniel's hand in hers, the way his smile never wavered, even when his voice had grown weak. She's going to be fine, he had whispered. Just make sure someone teaches her how to be brave. And now, she was being brave, because of a man who lived among tools and memories. She opened the car door and stepped out. The chime above the garage door rang softly as Rebecca pushed it open. The light inside was warm, muted by the early afternoon sun. Jake was hunched over a small red bike, adjusting the seat post with practiced precision. He looked up and blinked when he saw her. "You're Lily's mom?" he said. Not a question, just a fact. Rebecca nodded, her heels clicking faintly on the concrete as she stepped inside. She was still in her work clothes, a cream blouse tucked into tailored navy pants, a laptop bag slung over one shoulder. She looked entirely out of place among grease-stained rags and hanging chains. "I'm Rebecca," she said, offering her hand. Jake wiped his on a rag before shaking hers. His grip was firm, brief. "Jake." They stood in awkward silence for a beat. "I didn't mean to intrude," she said finally, her voice measured. I've been watching from my car for weeks now." "I figured," Jake said. "The black SUV." Rebecca's lips curled into a faint, embarrassed smile. "I guess I wanted to know what kind of man my daughter was spending time with," she admitted. "But now that I'm here, I realize I don't really know what to ask." Jake nodded slowly. "You want to know why she keeps coming back?" Rebecca's gaze swept the room. It was cluttered but clean, personal but not messy. Her eyes settled on the photograph on the wall, Jake and a woman with auburn hair, both beaming, her hands cradling a rounded belly. She stepped closer instinctively. "Your wife?" Jake's voice was quiet. "Emma. She died 5 years ago. Car accident. She was pregnant." Rebecca's chest tightened. She turned back to him. "I'm so sorry." He shrugged, not unkindly. "It was a long time ago. But some days feel like yesterday." She nodded, slowly, then said softly, "I don't know why my daughter is so drawn to you." Jake met her eyes. "I don't know why your daughter makes me remember someone I used to love more than anything in this world." The air between them shifted, less cautious now, more real. Rebecca looked back at the photo, then at the toolbox where Lily's tiny hands had worked alongside his. Her eyes finally returned to his, and for the first time she saw not just a man who fixed bikes, but someone who had once lost everything and still chose to be gentle. "I don't think I need to worry," she said, almost to herself. Jake offered the faintest smile. "No one's ever safer than when they're learning." Rebecca looked around once more, then gave a small, respectful nod. "Thank you, Jake, for whatever it is you're doing for her, whether you mean to or not." It happened on a Thursday afternoon. The sun had come out after 2 days of rain, and the kids in the neighborhood spilled onto sidewalks and empty parking lots with bikes, skateboards, and scooters. A small group of boys, including 10-year-old Mason from the next block over, had been watching Jake and Lily from a distance for weeks. They admired the tools, the grease, the way Lily got to use grown-up stuff. Inspired, they brought an old bike to the abandoned lot next to Jake's garage and tried to fix it themselves. It was harmless until it wasn't. Mason, emboldened, tried adjusting the brake cables on his own, then took the bike for a spin down the cracked asphalt. The front wheel caught in a pothole. He lost control. The fall was hard, his arm snapped at the elbow. The scream echoed all the way down the block. Within the hour, Jake's quiet garage became the center of chaos. Parents arrived first, then neighbors, then the police. "He told them it was safe to mess with brakes," a furious mother shouted, pointing at Jake's garage. "He's not a teacher. He's not certified." "What the hell is he doing showing kids dangerous tools?" Jake stood still, back against the garage door, hands up but not defensive, calm. He knew what this looked like, and he knew arguing would make it worse. "I never worked with that kid," Jake said quietly. "They all watch you," another parent snapped. "You started this." Within days, local media picked up the story. "Unlicensed mechanic under fire after child injured near garage." Photos of the rundown building with its crooked signage flooded the internet. No one cared about the difference between a lesson in patience and a lesson in tools. One morning, Jake arrived to find red spray paint across the front wall. Reckless, damorous, shut it down. Someone had taken a crowbar to the old metal sign above the garage. It hung at an angle now, one corner twisted like a broken wing. Rebecca saw the footage online while in her office, her stomach turning. Lily was already dressed to go, helmet on, backpack slung, and waiting by the door. "No," Rebecca said. Lily turned, confused. "What?" "You're not going today," she said firmly. "Not to the garage." "Why not?" Lily shouted, tears welling. "He didn't do anything wrong." Rebecca crouched down, her tone soft but unwavering. "It's not safe anymore, sweetie. People are angry. I just need time to figure things out." Lily shook her head violently. "He's not dangerous. He's nice. He listens to me." "I know," Rebecca whispered. "But this is complicated." Lily ran to her room, slamming the door. Her sobs echoed down the hall. Jake said nothing publicly. He did not post online, did not respond to calls from reporters. He simply closed the garage for the first time in 5 years. That night, after the lights had gone out in the neighborhood and the streets turned silent, Jake walked to the hospital alone. He moved through the sterile hallway slowly, holding a small brown paper bag. At the nurse's station, he asked for Mason. They let him in without comment. Inside, the room smelled of antiseptic. Mason lay on the bed, arm in a cast, eyes closed. His face was pale, drawn. Jake stood there for a long time. He said nothing. Then finally he took a deep breath and opened the bag. Inside was a brand new black helmet, sleek, sturdy, with an adjustable strap. Jake ran his fingers over the surface once, then set it gently on the nightstand. Beside it, he placed a folded note. "When you fall, put the helmet back on and try again. Do not let one mistake turn you into someone you are not. You are not broken, you just fell." He stepped back and looked at the boy, then turned and walked out of the room without another word. That night, no lights glowed in Jake's garage. The tools were quiet. The memories were loud. Rebecca sat at her kitchen table, her laptop open, her phone buzzing with messages she ignored. Outside, the town buzzed with judgment, outrage, speculation. Inside, she stared at the screen, her jaw clenched, her mind clearer than it had been in weeks. She had let fear steer her, again. Jake had never once asked for attention. He had not defended himself, had not fought back. He had simply accepted the weight of a misunderstanding he did not cause. But Lily's tears still echoed in Rebecca's ears, and something inside her knew. It was time to act. She called her attorney. Within hours, Rebecca had access to every piece of footage from the security cameras she had discreetly installed near the garage. She sat in her office, watching them one by one, taking notes, timestamping moments. There it was. Jake kneeling beside Lily, handing her a wrench and showing her how to hold it properly. Jake calmly removing tools from a curious boy's hands, shaking his head, mouthing, "Not yet, buddy." Jake redirecting a group of neighborhood kids who had wandered too close to the open garage, offering them granola bars and sending them home with a pat on the back. And then, the clip that made her stop. A child, Mason, she realized, had tripped over a loose cable while watching from the garage threshold. Jake had moved fast, catching the boy just before his head hit the ground. Jake's voice, barely audible on the grainy footage, was firm but kind. "I got you, kid. I'm not going to let you get hurt again. You're okay now." Rebecca watched the clip 3 times, her eyes burning. This wasn't negligence. This was care. Real, patient, quiet care. By the next morning, her team had prepared a statement. Rebecca wore a simple blue blouse, no makeup, her hair pulled back. The press conference was called at City Hall. Reporters gathered fast. Everyone wanted to hear from the CEO, whose daughter had become the face of the controversy. Rebecca stood behind the podium, papers in hand, but she never looked at them. "I'm here today," she began, her voice steady, "not just as the CEO of Welltech, but as a mother." Flashes from cameras burst like fireworks. She did not flinch. "A few weeks ago, my daughter Lily met a man named Jake. A mechanic, a stranger, someone I didn't know and someone I judged far too quickly. Like many of you, I let fear lead, and I was wrong." She paused. The room went still. Jake didn't invite the neighborhood kids into danger. He invited them into trust. He showed them how to work with their hands, how to listen, how to believe they were capable. Rebecca looked up, directly at the cameras now. "We reviewed hours of security footage. Jake never once let a child handle a tool unsupervised. He never once encouraged reckless behavior. And in fact, he stopped a boy from falling, quite literally, on more than one occasion." She took a breath, her voice warming. Jake is not just someone who fixes bikes. He's someone who's been quietly fixing something far more broken: our children's sense of worth. He reminded my daughter that she has a voice and that someone is listening. Then she smiled, just slightly, and I will not let his silence be mistaken for guilt. A murmur ran through the room. Rebecca lifted her chin. I am proud to announce the launch of a new initiative, the Hands-On Center, a nonprofit community workshop for children and teens to learn real-life skills: mechanics, craftsmanship, teamwork, resilience. It will be free for all local families, and the first instructor, the one who inspired it all, will be Jake. Cameras flashed wildly now. Reporters shouted questions. Rebecca stepped back from the microphone. She had said what needed saying. Outside the building, Lily waited in the back seat of the SUV. When Rebecca climbed in, her daughter turned to her, eyes hopeful. "Did you do it?" Lily asked. Rebecca smiled and pulled her close. "We both did." Far across town in a quiet garage, Jake sat at his workbench, unaware of the waves beginning to shift. But soon, very soon, the world would know the truth he never needed to speak. The Hands-On Center opened quietly, without fanfare or ribbon cutting, but within days the place buzzed with laughter, curiosity, and the clinking of tools. The former garage had been transformed into something more than a workspace. It was a sanctuary. Kids came with broken scooters, old lawnmowers, loose bolts, and tangled chains. They left with grease on their cheeks and a sense of pride in their steps. Jake stood at the center of it all. He wore the same boots, the same oil-stained shirt, but something about him had softened. He no longer avoided eye contact. He laughed more, even if it was quiet. And most mornings he arrived early just to watch the place come alive. Rebecca was often nearby. She helped organize, handled donations, answered emails, and brought in books about engineering and design for the little reading nook by the window. She rarely hovered over Lily anymore. Instead, she let her daughter lead, sometimes fixing things, sometimes just offering encouragement. Jake and Rebecca did not talk about what was happening between them. They did not need to. There was something in the way they moved around each other, like dancers who had learned the rhythm by heart without ever practicing. One evening, long after the last child had gone home and the lights had dimmed to a soft amber glow, Rebecca returned to the center. She looked tired, hair loose, blazer wrinkled, phone forgotten in her purse. Jake was seated on the workbench, polishing a set of donated wrenches. He looked up as she walked in. "Long day?" he asked. She gave a weary smile and nodded. "Board meeting, budget crisis, same old chaos." He gestured to the stool beside him. She sat without hesitation. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The silence between them was comfortable now, like a favorite song with no words. Then Rebecca leaned gently against his shoulder, her voice barely above a whisper. "Some things break and can't be fixed, right?" Jake looked at the wrench in his hands. "Sometimes. But," she continued, "even broken things, they can still mean something, still have value." Jake nodded slowly. "Sometimes meaning's the only thing left, and sometimes it's enough." They stayed that way for a while. No more words. No need. Days passed. The center flourished. Children returned weekly. Parents began volunteering. The community that once condemned Jake now rallied around him. Then came the Christmas workshop, a special event. Lights strung across the walls, toolboxes wrapped in red ribbons, hot cocoa served in paper cups. More than 50 children showed up with their families, laughter echoing off the rafters. Jake wore a slightly cleaner shirt that day, though he still had grease on his collar. He stood beside a work table, showing a group of kids how to align bicycle tires. Lily was among them, more confident than ever. As the day wound down, Lily disappeared into a corner, then returned holding a small envelope. She tugged on Jake's sleeve. He turned, and she handed it to him, cheeks flushed. "Merry Christmas, Mr. Jake." He opened it slowly. Inside was a handmade card, cut unevenly, decorated with stickers and smudged at the edges. The message was written in big, careful letters with a purple marker. Thank you for believing I could do it. Thank you for becoming Dad. Jake stared at the words. He looked down at Lily, who watched him with wide, nervous eyes. He knelt, pulled her into his arms, and held her tight. He did not say anything. He did not have to. But his shoulders trembled as he buried his face in her hair. Rebecca watched from across the room, one hand over her mouth, eyes shining. In that moment, surrounded by the clatter of tools, laughter of children, and the hum of healing hearts, Jake realized something he had never expected to feel again. He was home. 1 year later, the Hands-On Center was no longer just a garage, it was a place of transformation. Kids from across town came after school, some with broken gadgets, some with nothing but curiosity. All found something, skills, friendship, belonging. The old garage that once belonged only to Jake had grown, but its soul remained. Jake still wore his worn boots and spoke more with his hands than words. Yet now he laughed more, opened the doors with a lighter heart. Rebecca was there almost every day, organizing, planning, bringing cinnamon rolls on Fridays. Her business suits had been replaced by cozy sweaters. Her world had shifted from boardrooms to benches and soldering kits, and Lily had blossomed. Gone was the shy girl in a too-big hoodie. In her place stood a confident young leader who could teach kids how to patch a tire or listen for a loose chain. She had become a guide, not just in the garage, but in life. No one ever made it official, no court papers, no ceremonies. But to anyone who walked through the center, it was clear. Jake, Rebecca, Lily, they were family. In the corner of the garage, preserved exactly as it was, stood two symbols, a small pink bike and a black motorcycle. Whenever a child asked, Lily would smile and say, "That's where it all began." On the final Saturday of the year, the center held its annual gathering. Lights strung overhead sparkled as children ran between food tables, and laughter filled the yard. Jake stood at the edge of the courtyard, hands in pockets, watching it all. Rebecca stood beside him, hand resting gently on his arm. Lily was helping a little boy with his scooter when she suddenly gasped. "My helmet," she said, then ran toward the garage. "Dad," she called as she reached the doorway. "Dad, I forgot my helmet." Jake turned. The word, clear, proud, unhesitating, hung in the air. She had said it before, in quiet moments, but never like this. Not out loud, not in front of others. His chest tightened. Then she threw her arms around him. He knelt, holding her close. When he stood, he grabbed the helmet from its hook and gave her a small, crooked smile. "Let's get you back out there, kiddo." Rebecca joined them, slipping her hand into Jake's without needing to say a word. Together, they stepped back into the sunlight, surrounded by music, laughter, and the warmth of something real. On the garage wall was a mural, vivid colors, bikes, trees, and children in motion. At its center, in soft, painted script, were words that made every visitor pause. Family. Not always blood, but always heart. Jake stood there a long time, reading the words. Then he looked at Lily, helmet now on, eyes shining, and at Rebecca, who leaned her head against his shoulder. And for the first time in many years, Jake no longer felt like a man trying to fix what was broken. He felt like a man who had built something whole, something lasting, something his heart finally believed he deserved. And sometimes, family finds you when you least expect it, in the quiet hum of an old garage, in the trust of a child's smile, or in the steady hands of someone who simply chooses to care. Jake, Rebecca, and Lily reminded us that love is not always loud. It can come quietly, through acts of kindness, through healing hands, and through the courage to try again. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to Soul-Stirring Stories, where we share true and meaningful stories of hope, compassion, and the kind of love that changes lives. Don't forget to like, comment, and hit the bell so you never miss a story that might just stir your soul. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.